It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, a beautiful backyard wedding with close friends and family. But what started as a dream quickly turned into a nightmare when one neighbor decided to make it her mission to shut everything down. The worst part, she wasn't just a regular neighbor, she was the notorious HOA Karen who had a long history of causing trouble. The day was going perfectly. The sun was shining, the decorations were up, and the food was ready to be served. But out of nowhere, she came marching over, clipboard in hand, demanding that we stop the wedding immediately. Her reason? Apparently, we didn't have the proper HOA permits, and she was ready to call the cops if we didn't comply. I was stunned. How could she do this? But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just any guest at this wedding, I was the mayor's daughter. This little HOA Karen had no idea who she was messing with. Would this Karen get her wall? I couldn't believe what was happening. The woman, Karen as everyone in the neighborhood called her, had always been difficult to deal with. She'd filed complaints about everything from the wrong color of mailbox to the slightest noise. But this was different. This was my wedding day. My fiancé and I had planned everything down to the smallest detail, and now she was trying to ruin it all. She stood there, her arms crossed, glaring at me like I had done something wrong. It was like she didn't care about the people around her, the joy in the air, or the fact that this was a moment meant to be celebrated. She just kept saying how we had broken HOA rules and that we had to shut everything down. I could feel the anger rising inside me, but I didn't want to escalate things. I calmly told her I'd check into the situation, but she wasn't having any of it. She pulled out her phone and started recording, as if she was about to go public with this whole thing. My mind was racing. Should I mention who I was right then and there? Part of me wanted to shut her down immediately, but I also wanted to handle this the right way. Then I saw the police car pull up down the street. Was she serious about calling them? The tension was unbearable, and I wasn't sure how this would end. The police car slowly rolled into the driveway, its sirens muted but its presence undeniable. My heart skipped a beat. Was she really going to drag the authorities into this? The last thing I wanted was to involve the police, especially on such a special day. I glanced over at my fiancé, whose face was a mix of disbelief and frustration. He walked over to where Karen stood, trying to reason with her, but she wasn't having any of it. Karen just stood there, smug and unbothered, continuing to record everything like she was capturing some major crime. Her voice rose, lecturing us about the HOA rules and the disrespect we were showing the community. It was as though she had nothing better to do than enforce petty rules at the expense of people's happiness. I could see the guests beginning to notice, the whispers spreading among the crowd. I pulled my fiancé aside, trying to keep calm. I don't want to make a scene, but I can't just let her ruin this, I said, my voice shaky. But he was just as torn. He didn't want to escalate things either. It was hard not to get caught up in the frustration of it all. As the police officers stepped out of the car, Karen pointed directly at us, her finger shaking with authority. They're breaking the rules. This wedding isn't authorized, she said, making sure everyone within earshot could hear. The tension between her and the officers was palpable. I could sense they weren't sure who to side with. Would they believe Karen's accusations or take a different approach? The uncertainty hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst at any moment. I glanced at the guests. Some were trying to stay calm, but I could tell others were visibly uncomfortable, unsure if they should leave or wait for the situation to resolve. My father, who had been watching from the sidelines, gave me a reassuring look, but I knew he was getting frustrated too. He was well aware of Karen's history with the HOA and the constant trouble she stirred up. But my father wasn't just any local figure. He was the mayor, and in that moment, the weight of his position felt heavier than ever. But I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I should use my connection to him just yet. Would it make the situation worse if I pulled out that card now? As the police officers exchanged glances, I could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on all of us. The air seemed thicker, heavier, like the world was holding its breath. Karen's smug smile grew wider as she noticed the officers hesitating. She was savoring every second of this, acting like she had already won. I turned to my fiancé again, his face now pale with frustration. He whispered urgently, "Maybe we should just call it off. I hate to say it, but this is spiraling." But something in me refused to let it go. The idea of letting her win, letting her tear apart our wedding in front of everyone, it just felt wrong. I could see my dad, standing at the back of the crowd, his expression unreadable. He was the mayor, after all, and had dealt with people like Karen before, but this was my wedding day, and I didn't want to lean on his status. Still, the tension was growing, and I had to make a choice. Should I reach out to him now? Should I step in and use my connection? Just as I was about to take a step forward, one of the officers turned to Karen. "Ma'am, we can't enforce this. There's no clear violation." But Karen wasn't giving up. She pressed harder, practically pleading for them to take action. "You don't understand," she said, voice rising. "They're breaking the rules. This will set a bad precedent for the whole neighborhood." The officers exchanged another look, clearly uncomfortable. The crowd was getting restless, murmurs spreading. The longer this dragged on, the more I could feel the day slipping away from me. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind racing with options. I could sense Karen's desperation. She needed to win, but I wasn't ready to back down. Not now. Then, just as I thought things couldn't get more intense, a loud voice broke through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" I turned, shocked to see someone who could change everything. The voice that cut through the tension was unmistakable. It was my father's. I turned, my heart racing as I saw him walk in toward us, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a cold, steely resolve. The crowd parted, some people murmuring under their breath, others glancing nervously at the police officers. My father wasn't just any regular man. He was the mayor, and his presence in that moment felt like both a blessing and a curse. Karen froze for a second, her eyes widening in surprise, then quickly narrowing as she recognized him. She straightened up, clearly not prepared for this new development. My father was the last person she wanted to see today. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Her smugness was replaced with anxiety, but she quickly tried to recover. "Mayor, she began, but he cut her off with a single icy glance. "Karen," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I think you've caused enough trouble today. Why don't you leave and let these people enjoy their wedding?" The crowd was watching closely now, every single eye on the two of them. But before Karen could respond, the officer who had spoken earlier looked at my father and then back at Karen. "We've been advised this is a private event. We can't force them to shut it down." I couldn't believe it. We were so close to the edge of losing everything, but now, with my father standing there, the situation felt like it might finally take a turn. I held my breath, hoping this would all be over, but Karen wasn't finished yet. She turned to my father with a look of contempt. "Mayor, I didn't want to do this," she said, her voice dripping with thinly veiled spite. "But I've already made arrangements to take this to the press. If you want this story to get out, I'm more than happy to make sure it does." The room went silent. My father's face tightened, and I saw the flicker of something concern. No, not concern. He wasn't scared of a public backlash. But Karen had just to. The tension in the air was unbearable as Karen's words hung there, threatening to turn the entire wedding into a media circus. My father, the mayor, stood unflinching, his face betraying no emotion. I could see how hard he was holding back. He wasn't a man who crumbled easily, but Karen was pushing all the wrong buttons. But before anyone could react, something completely unexpected happened. One of the officers, the younger one who had been silent until now, stepped forward. He cleared his throat, glanced at my father, and then turned his attention to Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but firm, "I think you might have misunderstood something here." Karen's face twisted in confusion. "What are you talking about?" The officer nodded to my father, then turned back to Karen. "You've been filing complaints with the HOA about this wedding for weeks, haven't you?" What you don't know is that the wedding was approved under the mayor's office, and all the permits were handled personally by his team. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle in. Karen froze, her expression now a mix of disbelief and rage. My father gave a subtle nod, and the officer continued. You've been so focused on enforcing your personal agenda, you missed the fact that this event was fully authorized long before you ever got involved. A stunned silence filled the air. My heart hammered in my chest. I couldn't believe it. Karen had been so sure of herself, so convinced she could destroy the wedding, only to find out she'd been fighting against the very thing she thought she had control over. The officer then turned to the other officer and said, "There's nothing we need to enforce here. This wedding is legal. All complaints filed by Mrs. Karen are void." For a moment, no one moved. The crowd seemed frozen, unsure of how to react. But then, a few guests started to whisper, and others gave small smiles, relieved that the nightmare was over. Karen, her face flushed with embarrassment and fury, turned to leave. "This isn't over," she muttered under her breath as she stormed off, her tail between her legs. I let out a long breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. My fiancé pulled me into a hug, and for the first time that day, everything felt like it might actually be okay. But as the tension began to dissipate, there was one final moment that sent everything into a whirlwind. The officer who had spoken stepped toward my father and handed him a small envelope sealed with an official stamp. "This came for you," he said, his tone more serious now. My father looked at the envelope, his brows furrowed, and opened it without a word. As he read the contents, his face paled. The room around us seemed to freeze again as my father looked up, his eyes wide in shock. "Wait, what does it say?" I asked, my voice trembling. My father didn't answer right away. He just handed me the letter, and as I read the words on the page, I felt my stomach drop. The letter was from the HOA, but it wasn't about permits. It was a formal notice about my property being under investigation for code violations related to an alleged unauthorized construction. I looked up, my mind racing. Had we just been set up? Was there more to Karen's vendetta than we realized? The stakes had just gotten higher, and I had no idea what this new revelation meant for all of us.